let me show you a surprise.
Let me show you a surprise.
It just so happens that Wakwa is here in Lagos.
In Lagos, yes, just in case you're wondering where I've been.
It's usually very interesting. I mean, no one knows the quantum of things that have to go into the things that you do. So if you give us an inkling sometimes, it's good to have you in Lagos, so welcome.
It's great to be here.
Drink water. Drink water.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
For all I've been through this morning, let me drink some water.
We also have with us this morning to discuss the first conversation, Mr. Dele Ashiru, who is Chairman ASUU UNILAG. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
As well as Professor Abiodun Adesegun, who is Dean, School of Education and Humanities, Babcock University. He's also a professor of African history and history of religious education. He joins us virtually from Ogun State. Thank you for joining us this morning, Prof. Mr. Ashiru, first of all, let's speak to that the conversation that you just heard on the floor of the House of Representatives, where Honorable Ogun was advocating that students of public officers who was trying to legislate concerning students of public officers who study abroad. What are your thoughts on that? Let me use Marquez's words.
Well, it's a two-way thing. Whereas people should have the legitimate right to have their kids educated in any institution of their choice, it provides then a moral question. If we have discrepant education system in a country, and then a coterie that are privileged have their kids elsewhere because of the decadence in their own society. So one would think that when Nigeria's education was at par with those in Commonwealth countries and in other countries of the world, it didn't matter where Nigerians schooled. But in a situation where people take a deliberate disposition to discredit their own institution, and then they have their own kids abroad, is an eloquent manifestation of the kind of thinking and attitude that goes on at the level of government.
But you also heard some of their arguments, or you may have come across some of the other arguments against that, saying, look, what of those of us who have already been well-made and sent our children abroad before we came here? Are we going to return
I made
them?
that point that all Nigerians should be able to educate their kids anywhere in the world. Indeed, most of them schooled outside this country on scholarship. What is making it an issue now is the political elite's attitude to education at home. I mean, if you get the same quality of education anywhere in the world, what does it matter where anyone sends his kids? But you cannot deliberately destroy one and then have your own kids outside. It's a moral challenge, it's a moral question which, I mean, those in the political class can't wriggle out of.
Let me ask Professor Adesegun, is this something that is on the table of the political elite, or it is actually something that civil service ought to take control of without recourse, so to speak, to the political class? There ought to be a system that ensures things happen without the influence of the political class. I guess we'll come back to Prof. But let me ask you that same question. Should it be something on the table of the political class, really? We have a civil service. We have the Ministry of Education, the Federal Ministry of Education, states' ministries of education, all over the place. They ought to do some things with or without the influence of the political class. There is a system. That's why we have a civil service, isn't it?
Yeah, but we don't have a system. There should be a system. But we don't have a system.
Let me ask you, are we, sorry to, I mean, I have to butt into that question. As you said, there ought to be a system. We don't have a system, but we know that the decadence did not start today. The decadence did not start in the Fourth Republic when we now started having democracy. A lot of people will, in fact, argue that it was during our military interregnum that we had this problem of decadence in the universities. That's when ASUU was formed. That's when students were protesting. There was the famous Ali must go, protest then. So if the decadence started that far back, are we really hoping that all of it will be corrected? Because we know that decay, it takes a while for things to decay and for things to get to a halt. But we also know that it takes a lot of effort to try and fix it, perhaps a lot more time. Are we being fair in our assessment when we say that the political class deliberately, because it's the political class who say, but it's not our fault, we met it like this, we took vows to come and try and fix it. In the meantime, we all cannot be punished as a result of what is happening there.
This question is amusing, actually. I mean, because what is the difference? If you say a political class, whether military or civilian or whatever.
Ideally, should the military be political? Should it be classified as a political class?
Oh, yeah. See, once you venture into politics, I mean, there's a whole lot of write-up by Huntington, even locally here, Falola and Hombury, about how the military became so politicized, such that, I mean, you have to consider who is sitting next to you to even volunteer, some opinion in the mess. So once a Praetorian Guard, which is the military, who ordinarily should be subservient, to civil politics, ventures into it. And ever since they have remained, even today that you are talking about, David Mark, who was Senate President, was a retired military. Obasanjo was the current head of state, a retired general. So when you make that kind of distinction, it becomes amusing. But even at that, when we say a society is decaying, and the decay started a long time ago, shouldn't there be a time to say, look, let us reverse this decay?
Are we not beginning to see those signs?
How?
You're not, there's been...
How? Why? Nigeria is worse off today than it was 30 years ago, even under the military.
When you even talk about the military...
And we can take instance, let's take, some statistics. The best roads were built under the military, even though I'm not an advocate of the military regime. These ones who call themselves political class, they have left no place, no turn unstoned since the return to the so-called democracy.
But most of these, my apologies, Mark, just to follow up on your argument along the military, most of the policies that came under the military were through civilians. Most of these economic policies, education policies, should I use ministers? No, ministers and all of those things. Those things came from the civil service, from civilians under the same civil service, so under the same military you're talking about. So we can't really squarely say it's all because of the military, can we?
Yeah, but that's the argument that I'm making, actually. That you can't really make a distinction between whether you are military or civilian. We just have a political class, whether military or civilian, that is parasitic, that is dependent, that doesn't love the people of Nigeria.
Is there a history?
Even the narrative under democracy is symptomatic of what you have under military, my ministry, my government, where I dump, I did. So where lies
Mr. Ashley,
the so-called democracy?
There was a time in this country where such institutions as UCH were praised highly.
Oh, sure.
It is in this same country. Yeah. So can you trace, and that's not the only one, that's just an example of several institutions of higher learning in the country that had good names, if I can use that term, and they are very highly revered all over the world. What happened? Can you trace the trajectory of the decay?
Simple. Just government's insensitivity and unwillingness to prioritize education.
When you say, let's decrypt it. When you say government, it's not just one person. As Marquez said, it's historic. So, and that's why I said we were supposed to, there was a system that made UCH what it was, and several other universities all over the nation at the time. What happened?
What happened is multifaceted. One, at the level of Nigeria's decay as a sovereign nation. Nigeria is also a country that lacks relative autonomy. Most of the policies that you see in the education, in the health sector and all that are received policies from institutions and organizations outside the country. And the IMF and World Bank had done more damage to education and health, much more than any other organ. Take, for example, the decay began when government said, look, now education can no longer be for all. Education must now be commercialized and privatized such that only those who can pay for it can access it. And that's when government began to reduce subsidy on education, reduce funding to university, sponsoring crisis.
But let's face it, Dr. Asher, if we look at the realities, our realities as a country, of course we haven't made a lot of wise choices. And that also includes in our population growth. Our population growth also ought to be an advantage. We're not even able to count successfully how many we truly are. But we know that we are reproducing at an exponential rate, at a rate that even we're not as productive in that regard in earning. So I do believe that at some point government must have found itself hampered to say, I cannot cope. Let's face it. I mean, the chances are very high that if we had tried to, and I'm not making excuses for government, I'm just saying these are some of the realities that stared us in the face. So the decay that we're talking about, I mean, look at the population of the students, the number of students who are currently seeking admission into higher institutions of learning. JAMB, is really struggling with that figure. When eventually they're even able to pass them, students are not even able to get placement in universities.
See, this is my reaction to that. Let's not continue to make excuses for government. Yes, population, our population ought to be an advantage. And the way population increased exponentially, government's revenue increased exponentially. What has government been able to do?
They did really increase exponentially?
There were, of course, you shouldn't be asking me this question. This is public knowledge.
Let's look at it in terms of our productivity. I mean, we cannot be where
and
we
if
are.
we are not productive, that should be a plus.
So we should ask. I mean, because at the end of the day,
who should drive productivity
there will be questions.
in any society? The same political class.
There will be questions.
Elite consensus about a direction for the country, which we don't have in any of the sectors.
Dr. Asher, the people and the cadre in the ivory towers, they're not. I mean, some people will say yes, you can be activists, but I think that oftentimes what they expect of people in the ivory towers, of the academics in the ivory towers, should be solutions. If we currently are where, it's the truth. I mean, if we currently are where we are, should it be a case of us looking for, I mean, to try and trace the problems, but to also find solutions? The solutions to Nigerian problem
is everywhere. Here we had a president who told the world that, yeah, you are my advisor, but am I bound to take your advice? And this was also a president who had a think tank with a blueprint, which I have all the copies of the blueprint in my office, about how to develop Nigeria. We've been waxing lyrical about diversifying the economy and all that. But it remains diversification, only by lip service. And then when we had a minister of agriculture in this country who, all he does is share telephone and all that. You can't find tomato in the market. You can't find rice anywhere. And he got several awards as an excellent minister of education. It's a question of priority. It's a question of government's disdain for intellectual solution to Nigeria's problem. all the solutions to Nigerian problem are in the Nigerian universities. People have written papers, written letters, even in government archives, about diversification of the economy, about making this society a productive one. Look, how do you explain a country that doesn't produce anything and yet is the largest importer of everything? And even the one we produce here don't get government patronage. Innocent is there producing vehicles. Is there any deliberate government policy to say that moving forward, let us expand production in this sector and buy innocent vehicle, beginning from the president? Look at fabric. How many of those in the political class and those who rule us wear Nigerian fabric? Even when, AGOA, we signed an agreement with other countries, government cannot push it. So what are we talking about? The solutions are there, but whether those who are to carry on with the solution are willing to do so is a different thing. And much more fundamentally, as we blame leadership, we should also blame Nigerians. Nigerians are too docile, and they take all kinds of bullshit from those who rule them. How do you have, what the Minister of Labor and on Productivity yesterday, look at the arrogance, look at the utterances. My ministry, there's no minister who wants a ministry. All the ministries belong to the Nigerian people.
But isn't that how to take responsibility?
By personalizing a ministry?
Isn't it his ministry?
It is not his ministry. He's only a public servant in that ministry. That ministry belongs to the Nigerian people. And when Nigerian people say, this is what you are doing is antithetical to the spirit of development in the country, what he needs is a review.
Would you not say, Dr. Ashiru, that...
And not a blatant rationalization.
On that same issue, sir, would you not say that your office is your office?
Your office is not your office.
Your office.
I don't have an office. I don't have an office.
But ASUU is your school, isn't it?
Yeah, no, ASUU, Unilag is my school. The office there belongs to Unilag.
So Unilag...
And Unilag belongs to the Nigerian people.
So Unilag is not
I am only a tenant in that office. I can be kicked out of the place anytime.
We are all tenants in the world. But
also, why would then the minister come and say this is
nonetheless,
in
a manner of speaking, and I think that sometimes it's about context. I'm not making it, and I'm not. In fact, I'm not the minister spokesperson. But what I'm trying to make is that some people will say it's a matter of speaking, and it's a manner of speaking. In my ministry, in my office,
it's a mindset.
In our office,
you can't hear an American president say it's his office. Go and check the narrative.
Okay, well, we can always go and check that out. I'm sure that there are people who will go and be checking out. But let us see if Professor Abiodun Adeshegun is with us now. Do we have that confirmation?
Yes, Professor Adeshegun. Well, thank you for joining us, Prof.
Thank you very much.
I'm almost certain that you've been listening to a bit of what we've been talking about. Well, the whole conversation is about improving tertiary education in Nigeria, and that those who are for or against foreign education for students, there are those who are arguing. You may want to, first of all, add your voice to that argument in the House of Representatives, that children of public officers should only school in Nigeria to fast-track development of the education sector in the country. What's your take on that?
Thank you very much. I think that maybe we should look at this whole matter from a different perspective. In the Japanese history class which I teach, I remember that when Japan started the railway system in the 1880s, they immediately involved the private sector, so that as government was putting in some effort, private sector was also helping to develop the railway system in Japan. That's as far back as the 1880s. The fact is that the way our educational structure is now, the government alone cannot be able to really fund it adequately or be the sole player in that field. Look, we have, according to the statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics, we have 600,000 placements in our universities as currently situated. We have about 170 universities comprising of federal, state, and private. But with 600, that is about only 25% of the candidates that are qualified, that have passed the examinations to be able to really go to these universities. That means that we don't have enough carrying capacity. So government needs to put in place private sector friendly policies that will enable industry to endow universities with research and development funds and allow people to establish universities based on certain criteria to be able, for us to be able to, achieve what we need. Take the state of New York alone. It has over 240 universities. Ogun State has the highest number of universities in Nigeria, and there are only 13. So you can see that the placements are not there. So you cannot stop anybody who wants to go and train in Ghana or in the UK or in Germany from going to school there, because the placements are not just there, and we cannot really admit all the students that we have that are successful and that are capable of entering university matriculation.
Is it an argument of the placement for these officers that we are talking about, or even the quality of education that comes out from the schools? Because that's the argument. Some of them, they may not even be aware of this argument of placements. The concern has been that of the quality of education that comes out. I think it was a minister also that said that a good number of graduates from Nigerian universities are unemployable.
I think that is just speaking from a layman's point of view. I've been to several universities in Nigeria and I've interacted, and I know that the quality is there. What the area that we may be having a challenge is in the area of science. Take, for instance, my last child. He graduated from Babcock University with a medical degree. He is now a medical practitioner in the UK. So if the quality of what we delivered at Babcock was not good, there's no way that he will have gotten a placement in the UK, in the NHS, trying to make a career for himself. So it's not about quality, because Nigerian graduates go out there to America, to different parts of the world, and they do very well in their postgraduates, which means that the foundation that they've had in Nigeria is very good.
Well, Prof, you have spoken about how, government needs to enable policies that will help the private sector, set up centers of research and endow it with funds. You are currently in the private university system and you have operated there. Some people argue that there's nothing hindering you, there should be nothing hindering you from being able to seek this sort of support. Or do you also rely on the policies that government will make before you're able to seek those kinds of support for endowment?
Well, as far as I know, government has not stopped anyone from looking for endowments. So we at Babcock University are doing our best to, key into that and get what we need to get. But the point is that let us start from the TED Fund, for instance. The TED Fund is a fund that is generated by Nigerian companies in Nigeria, doing business in Nigeria. And the students that we educate in the private universities are Nigerians. So up to now, it beats me. And I don't understand why government should preclude private universities from having access to TED Fund to start with. Because, opening that door also will be a foundation for doing other things that will be noticed by funding bodies worldwide.
They're working on that. I know that even the ES of the Executive Secretary of TED Fund has raised that as an issue, but he says that while they're trying to work on that to see how they can persuade government that even private universities should be able to do this, they said that there are ways around it. Lecturers in private universities are able to collaborate with their colleagues in government-owned universities. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. That is very correct. So this is a recent pronouncement that I believe that ourselves and other private universities are keying into right now. in order to be able to do that. But it goes beyond just research, because you need infrastructural development, you need laboratories, you need cutting-edge technology to be able to do cutting-edge research that will provide solutions to real human problems in real time. This is what the universities need to do now. There has to be a nexus between the university and the industry.
Exactly, and I think it dovetails into that question about employability. When you say that it is not true, I mean, as you said, and as you acknowledge that it is true that in science courses, there is a challenge there. And I'm sure that even Ms. ASUU, you will not shy away from the fact that there are you don't agree that there is a challenge in the area. I'll just give you an instance. Yesterday, I happened to be at a summit that has to do with employment, and somebody gave an instance of how the language for programming, which she was taught in the course of computer science, was outdated. That the most relevant education she got as a student was what she got during her IT, when she was placed in the industry to learn for 3 months, I think, 3 months at each time. She did it for about 6 months. And then the 1 year she had as a youth corper. That was the most valuable education she had, which placed her in good stead to be able to get a job. So if that is the situation, how can we really say that it is not true?
Okay.
That a lot of what is being taught today is not relevant to the industries which we are preparing these children for?
Okay, well, you see, there's a fundamental assumption that is wrong. University education is not for employability. That one is basic. Now, there's also a lot wrong with the system of education that we have.
It's not for employability.
Not university education is, in fact, if you have a good university education, you should be an employer of labor.
So why do industries?
Just let me finish my thought.
Okay.
Now, if you look at systems all over the world, only a certain percentage of citizens in a country should be able to go to a university. The rest should go to what they call a polytechnic, a monotechnic, a technical college, etc. Such that by the time, they finish from those, institutions of learning, as it was in Nigeria in the past, they can move into the industry as artisans and all that. Today, you are regarded as a less than stellar human being if you don't have a university education. And that's why the pressure is on university education. Check any developed countries in the world. Those who populate their universities are not their citizens. There are people from Nigeria, from China and all that who go, Secondly, I want to react to some assertions made by Prof. with due respect. The first is that TED Fund, private universities by TED Fund law should contribute to TED Fund. If what we were told when private universities were to be licensed was that they were complete public universities, and government had done all that they could to achieve that, but for the resilience of us. So it beats my imagination if people who thought that they had the wherewithal to establish a university will now come back and be asking for government support to build infrastructure in a private university. By TED Fund law, companies which private universities can fall under are to contribute a certain percentage to TED Fund. In terms of research, you made the point. Yes, if you are a researcher in a university and governments desire development, they can sponsor any scholar, whether from private, faith-based, public, or wherever university, to engage in that. But it also comes back to the question of willingness. In one of our agreements with government, so you complain about funding education. Now, these consultancies that you give to your friends and cronies and dependents from elsewhere in the world, take it to the university. Let us do the thinking for you. And you pay so that we can use that money to educate Nigerian citizens and develop research.
Okay.
Up to now, government has failed. Finally, please, you see, when we talk about the crisis in the education sector, yeah, access is a challenge. But sending your child to a university outside Nigeria is today a status symbol. and a class privilege.
It has always been.
It has not always been.
It has always been.
It has not always been. Majority of those who are taking these decisions that are under developing education in Nigeria, schooled outside with government scholarship, not with individual funding.
So perhaps there was a time, and even at that time, for people to be able to get government scholarship, you had to be exceptional.
Oh, yes.
So at that point,
today the exceptional ones don't get money to go abroad.
No, there'll be arguments on that. I mean,
let's have the conversation and do a statistics.
I think there is a government, but I'm trying to remember the name of this particular institution where a lot of our citizens have gone to. They apply and they get funding at least I know
at what level?
1 or 2 people. Maybe for masters or for...
I'm talking about basic university education.
Still, I mean, sometimes, you know, when we give this information, it's extremely important. People are watching us. People don't know this availability. When my cousin told me, it was the first time I knew that such a thing existed.
Which one?
I'm trying to remember the name of the... Yes, I'm trying to remember the name of the institution,
and that's also,
which gives
you
government
are also
funding.
even helping me to make my point. Look, in Unilag...
You were talking about class, Mr. Ashu. That's why I interrupted you. You were talking about class and how education, university education...
Even to educate your word in Cotonou here now is fast a status symbol.
Then, so maybe it has now changed to a status symbol of economics. I mean, an economic status symbol. But then...
And there's also the government policy that if you school out of Nigeria, it's added advantage.
So we all know, and this is.
So if
I'm trying my best to, you know, make this as conversational as possible and as not as confrontational, because it's supposed to be.
I'm not being confronting. I'm deploying facts.
It's a
and nobody you are not able to push this argument because they are counterfactual.
It's a discussion that we're having, Dr. Ashu. You talked about how university education should not be for everybody. You talked about how university education is not for employability. But that is not what we were told. I mean, this is not how we have socialized our university education system. When our universities started in Nigeria, it was so that we could fill certain cadres within and certain needs in our country. Isn't that correct? And so it was a lot of people aspired that their children should go to universities so that when they finished, they could get jobs. Wasn't that how it worked?
So if there is a counter-narrative, we shouldn't deploy that because we are socialized into that.
If that
and it's fast taking out the reason, the tear for setting up a university.
So if that is the case, if we now say that this is not how it ought to be, let us go back there. And we see that a lot of our people are going out with the resources which could come. We all know that going abroad doesn't come cheap. We know that a university education abroad is not cheap. Not everyone can afford it. In fact, perhaps a very minute percentage of this country can afford it. If that is the case, is it really right that we watch, because as a result of what is happening in our own university education system, that all of these monies are ferried out of our country, valuable resource that we could keep here and manage because of how our structure, our university system is currently structured? Is it right that we watch that it goes out like that?
Who is doing the watching? Those that are supposed to enact policies, develop the local education system, the national one, are the ones deliberately destroying it and taking their own kids out of the country. So you see, the challenge is
there's a constant argument for subsidies in our education system, especially at the university level. And government says these subsidies are not sustainable. It is time that we begin to find alternatives. From the 2009 agreements, we also know that there was also the Wale Babalakin committee, which was supposed to, also look at what was happening in the education system and find alternatives to how this should be funded. It would seem that that collapsed. The reasons are still very unclear, but it would seem that there is that resistance to try and get funding from elsewhere apart from government. There is a belief that government can afford all of it. Is that correct?
You see, I think that what they are trying to do is to push a particular narrative. And you ask me a question, you won't allow me to answer. And then you will raise another question and shift away from that. I think that if we really want to have a conversation, the way you have talked about it, it is important to allow us exhaust our thoughts and then move to other issues. I know that the issues are legion. and we may not be able to talk about them within a program like this. Now, to respond to your question, there's nothing like Babalaki Committee. Babalaki was appointed to lead a government negotiating team and got to the negotiating table and turned himself to an emperor whose opinion must be accepted as law. And our union told him that, look, we are a union that had engaged government in a series of negotiations over the years. And this was not the practice. For 4 years, Wale Babalaki was not able to birth any agreement. Within 6 weeks after his exit as pro-chancellor, Professor Munzali Jubril delivered what Babalaki could not in 4 years within 6 weeks. So that tells you the mindset, the attitude, the thinking of Babalaki himself. Had his first degree in Unilag, and because of his privileged position went abroad and got all other degrees and was trying to impose the values of England and America and all that within a context that is very different.
Isn't that what we desire? I mean, you just said that, you know, university degrees are not for employment. Isn't that what we desire? The people who established universities established them for a reason. Isn't that correct? Now we're trying to move that way. You say he's trying to impose what happened in England and all those other places on Nigeria because our context is different?
Yes. And I don't think that there's anything contradictory in what I have said. I said that university education is not, and that's at the level of ideal. It's not what we were socialized in. When universities were established in Nigeria, they were to produce middle-level manpower, interpreters. Will we still remain within that socialization?
Well, Prof,
60-something years after?
Dr. Ashiru, there are so many things.
I am saying that
my apologies.
universities is you to train your mind in such a way that when you leave the university, you look at your society, identify a problem and solve it.
The question then
In doing that, you can employ a lot of people and create jobs.
Dr. Ashiru, some people will
Not to
argue.
go and be doing
there'll be arguments
plaque
that,
and the
so
kind of thing.
maybe in the arts they were interpreters, but we know that in the sciences our doctors were top cadre. We know that our engineers were top cadres. Well,
How many engineers did we have in Nigeria before 1960 and beyond? How many? And how many doctors compared to geographers and historians and English teachers and all of that?
Let's bring Professor Adeshego into this conversation. Well, Prof, you definitely have been listening to some of the things that we are saying. And then, of course, there is that issue that's just been raised by Dr. Ashiru about the dichotomy between public universities and private universities. You may want to speak to that as well. But perhaps to even begin to tailor this conversation would be an issue that Dr. Ashiru raised earlier about a direction for our education. There are those who argue maybe if we had an ethos that says this is what our education should achieve for the nation, a national direction that all universities, all of our education, whether public or private, they are focused on. What's your take on that? There are those who also argue we don't even have that vision. Consequently, everyone is just firing freely.
Let me agree with those that say that we don't have the vision and direction to say this is exactly what we want to achieve. But to say that education is not for employability will be missing the point up totally. Because it is true that we teach entrepreneurship in our schools now in order to, motivate the young people to establish businesses. But at the same time,
I'm pretty sure that once he comes back, we'll get him back. He doesn't agree with you on whether or not we have, it has a purpose of employability. Let's even assume, without conceding what you said, that it is not for employability. It is for entrepreneurship. It's for you to be able to stand alone. The skills that are deployed today, can they help any degree holder stand alone?
Well, they cannot. They cannot.
So the option they have is to get a job.
So yes, the option they have is to get a job.
And that now we hear that they are not employable.
You see, that phrase is not absolutely correct. It's not. You look at these people you are saying they are not employable. If by chance they find their way out of this country, they make worse. I deployed this fact here before. The same Nigerian graduates that are not employable, Saudi Arabia is scrambling to recruit them here in Nigeria. And in all sectors, engineering and all that. You see, and I need to make this clarification. I didn't say that education is not for employability. What I said is university education. Now, if you went to a polytechnic, for example, and you are well trained there, you know, as for example, a good plumber, you should be able to function effectively in that area within our society. Today, if you look at JAMB tells you to pick a form and take in order of priority. You take one university, one polytechnic, one monotechnic, one college of education. Which means that even government had, done that categorization within their own conception in the area of priority, and they put education last.
So is there then a vision to that? Well, don't answer that yet.
Let's quickly take this. I mean, we have breaking news coming in now that a Max Air carrying over 450 Nigerian passengers, mostly students from Romania, has landed at the private jet terminal of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. The passengers are said to be Nigerians who fled into Romania from Ukraine in face of the Russian invasion. Again, Max Air carrying over 450 Nigerian passengers, mostly students from Romania, has landed at the private jet terminal of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. And the passengers are said to be Nigerians who fled into Romania from Ukraine in the face of Russian invasion. It's certainly heartwarming to get this news that at least some of our students who have been stranded in Ukraine, and lots of them making their way into these countries, Romania, Poland, and other neighboring countries, are now being able to come back home successfully. So certainly, I'm sure that this is certainly news to cheer for all of those who have been, anxious about the fate of their loved ones who are stuck with around that axis in the crisis. At least for these ones, I think that their anxiety certainly has been resolved, and we hope that there'll be many more flights.
Most certainly.
I think there'll be a few more flights to evacuate, especially after that vote by the president. $8.5 million.
That's no small money.
Exactly, to bring back home Nigerians who have been stranded as a result of that particular crisis. So this is news for you. 450 of them, not all of them students, but mostly students, are now back home at the private jet area of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. That's in Abuja. And
this naturally also tailors into the conversation we're having. They are mostly students.
Indeed.
So, Prof, you were making some case the other time about employability or not of students in Nigeria.
Yes, I was saying that people from India are working remotely with the California company because they have the knowledge, they have the IT base to be able to do that. So to continue to argue for these polytechnics and monotechnics is not the way to go, because right now,
they are not relevant.
Will you find hospital employing nurses that
Prof,
are from the...
If you can hear me, Prof. If you can hear me, Prof. Is that to say that the monotechnics and polytechnics are not relevant?
Why not develop them into universities of technology, where they can still do the same thing, but get additional knowledge that will make them more capable to do what they need to do? So this is the way to go.
Are you saying then that legalizing university... Just a moment, Prof. We have polytechnics that are legalized. They are legal entities in the country. Are you saying that there is no place for them whatsoever in our education system?
Well, you answer this question then. Why is Yaba College of Tech now a University of Technology? Why are some of the polytechnics being converted to universities of technology? Because the knowledge base is expanding, and you need a curriculum or curricula that will cover so many things than the polytechnics and the monotechnics can cover. So they will essentially still be doing the same thing, but in a more refined and in a more expanded way, if they are converted to universities of technology.
Is that really the situation, here. Prof? I mean, is that really the reason? We know that, I mean, I'm talking about socialization and our preference for university education. The fact that, you know, getting a university education is a status thing. Poor as our university education might seem, for a number of people, there is discrimination. The House of Reps had to pass legislation in that regard, that there must be no discrimination between HND degree holders and university degree. Isn't that part of the reason why we're converting almost all the polytechnics and what have you to universities?
Yes, thank you. Everybody wants the good life, and they want to be able to be pivotal to development. So whatever it takes to do that. When you continue to say that university education is a status symbol, I beg to disagree. I took my students to Rome on a study tour, and one of them was the daughter of a pepper seller in Shagamu, Ogun State. How? So I asked, how did your mother come up with the funds for you to be able to make this travel? He said, because my mother wants me to engage with the world. So all these people that are leaving the country, either by way of education or by work, they can still contribute to our country in terms of foreign exchange, because after all, they bring in the money that they make to Nigeria. They build houses in Nigeria. They establish businesses in Nigeria. So we need to think globally and understand.
Prof, you have made the point, as far as I'm concerned, about being a status symbol. I mean, when you spoke about her mother being a pepper seller, you knew immediately that, you know, it would have been very difficult for her to be able to come up with those funds. If she had said her father had a university degree, you might not have questioned how she was able to come about the funds to travel.
Yes, indeed. So, when we came back, I went to the woman and I saluted her and I said, you are forward thinking that you could put together cooperative money, ASUU, in the marketplace to send your child to Rome. That means a lot, that you know really the value of education, and you know that you want to give this girl a chance. As we speak now, the girl is out of the country and is working in the United States. So Prof, it's going to add value to the mother, it's going to add value to Shagam society, it's going to add value to Nigeria.
Even though I mean, some people will say that there might be some questions with the examples which you have used in terms of the fact that almost everybody is out of this country working. I mean, you talked about your son who's schooled in Nigeria is out of the country. This young lady who's done very well for herself with the support of her mom is out of the country. And that raises another another set of questions. What we're trying to see is how we can improve our education system in such a way that we're not only employable abroad, we're able to add value to our system here and, improve our education system in such a way that we're even able to attract students from out of the country into our country. What are some of the ways that you've given the example of TED Fund? Dr. ASUU disagrees with you that private universities should be able to get access to that. But what other ways, what other means are private universities looking at? Are exploring to see how they can, make it more attractive to even bring students out of this country into the country?
Thank you very much. This is a conversation we have every day at Babcock University, that we want to make our university a center of global excellence. And that means being able to internationalize our staff and students so that people...
Oh, no.
So we have to deliberately work towards providing the ambience, the environment to be able to do that. And that involves a lot of money. And this is what we are talking about, that if we leverage with industry, and they are funding some of the R&D that we are doing for them, then we have enough money to endow chairs and call people from Yale, from Oxford, from anywhere to come to Nigeria as exchange scholars or exchange students to be able to enrich the system of learning that we have in our country today.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that. Let me quickly take the closing comments of Dr. ASUU. He believes that, you know, leveraging with the private sector is one of the ways to go about it, seeking endowment. Is it? I know that, you know, at least UNILAG has benefited immensely from that, but I'm sure that there's still room for improvement. What other ways is ASUU exploring to see how we can even make our own students, especially families who can afford it, stay here?
You see, the first thing is to review the entire education system in Nigeria. And like he pointed out, with a clear philosophy and direction for that Nigerian education, that's what they did in China, in India, in Singapore, and in all the other countries that are making progress. We have to have a direction. And that policy must be faithfully followed. The example of a market woman in Shagamu sending how many market women, that example is also part of the mindset that is destroying education in Nigeria. There are over 1,000 market women in Shagamu. If only one is able to raise money to go to home, is that a success story? Or to work assiduously to ensure that education is made affordable and accessible by deliberate government policy.
It's an endless conversation.
Some of us would not have been able to make it to the university if we don't have futuristic and very, you know, brilliant
which we
politicians,
expect you,
people like Jakonde and all of that.
Dr. ASUU, which we expect you to also, you know, communicate to the students that you're teaching. But for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Dr.
Thank you for all that you are doing for Nigeria and for us. We are very grateful. Channels Television.
Thank you. Dr. ASUU is Chairman ASUU at the University of Lagos. We've also had Professor Abiodun Adeshegun, who is Dean, School of Education and Humanities at Babcock University. He is also Professor of African History and History of Religious Education. He joined us virtually from State. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay.